Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
I'm London, and this is
Maybe we can use a softer touch on immigration. An unexpected change of tone from President Trump, but is it too late for that? It is 9 a.m. in Washington. It's 6 p.m. here in Dubai. I'm Eleni Giokos, coming to you live from the World Governments Summit today, wrapping up the last day of what has been a whirlwind of diplomatic talks, push for AI innovations, and back to connect the world. Also coming up, if you're wondering who will pay the price for the Epstein revelations, you should be looking at Britain, not the United States. Plus, trilateral peace talks in Abu Dhabi. There are Russia's interest in ending its war with Ukraine, and American Navy anchors Anna Gavin makes a public plea for safe return for her abducted mother. All right, we're 30 minutes to go before the start of trade in New York. I want to check in on these markets, which of course have been majorly under pressure over the past couple of days, and it's because of what we call the Magnificent Seven. It's those tenants taking a big dip. Today, you've got the Dow down 0.4%, taking a 0.7%, Nasdaq also down almost 1%. Alphabet actually doing quite badly in pre-trade. We'll check in on those numbers in about 30 minutes from now. All right, we're also keeping an eye on U.S. President Donald Trump. He is speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington. To be posted on what he says, we're monitoring that very closely. All right, I want to begin with the British Prime Minister. In a fierce battle for his political future, Keir Starmer is facing growing criticism of his appointment of Peter Mandelson as British ambassador to the United States. Despite Mandelson's ties to Jeffrey Epstein, he was removed from the post last year. Today, Starmer issued a direct apology to Epstein's victims.
I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him. And sorry that even now you're forced to watch this story unfold.
Right, meanwhile, across the Atlantic, fresh fallouts from the Justice Department's latest Epstein document release. The boss of a top U.S. law firm has stepped down after emails showing he communicated with a convicted sex offender as recently as 2019. I want to get the latest from CNN Politics senior reporter Stephen Collinson. He's live in Washington for us. I mean, hearing Keir Starmer's apology to all victims, and of course, or do you believe that it underlines the seriousness of his mistake?
Well, I think that kind of apology to the victims is quite notable in itself, just because we haven't heard that from the President of the United States. And that, I think, underscores this big difference between the way that this scandal is playing out in the US and in the UK. I think the issue here is that the independent machinery of investigation and accountability in the UK, in Norway, where this is playing out, and in Poland, they are still intact. What we have in Washington is the Trump administration controlling the Justice Department and a pliant Republican Congress, and that is one reason why we're not getting this sense of accountability. We have seen, as you said, the head of that law firm step down in recent hours from his position. I think attention now is turning to the people who knew Epstein and whether they knew more than they were letting on. Even if a lot of these people have not got any criminal liability, it does raise the question of why so many people were still socializing and doing business with Epstein even after he left office, even after his prison in 2009 after sex offences that were convicted in Florida. So all of that is playing out, and it gets to the same question for Starmer. It's that how could he have offered Peter Mandelson the job of UK ambassador to Washington, from which he was later fired, without knowing more about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein?
Look, the Prime Minister also saying and stressing, frankly, earlier that everything is being done to do justice for Epstein. I want you to listen to this.
I want to be able to those documents as quickly as possible. I wanted to release them yesterday, and to talk about them at the Prime Minister's questions. But the police have advised that releasing certain information now could be prejudicing a future investigation or legal process. And however frustrating from my personal point of view that is, and it is, I will not take any step, however politically tempting, however popular, that risks justice for victims. Because this is not, and must never become, a political game.
You know, there's a lot to be said about why it's so impacting. It's very much front of mind, but also importantly how President Trump is insulated. Should we be expecting, prosecution in the UK as opposed to what you're expecting in the United States? Because the Justice Department is veering away from that.
Yeah, we know that Peter Mandelson is already under investigation by the authorities in the UK. I think what you saw there was a Prime Minister whose credibility was already in deep question well before the latest revelations about Mandelson that came out in those files from the Justice Department. This is just a catalyst for more questions about Keir Starmer's judgment and political skills. In the United States, the comparison is very different. President Trump, although he's not as strong as he once has been politically, he is in no real danger from the Epstein saga, despite being mentioned in emails that were released by the Justice Department more than 1,000 times. I think part of this is to do with the fact that doubts about President Trump's character have long been baked into his political personality right back to the 2016 election. So he's done so much that anything that comes out about him is difficult to shock. But again, the organization in the United States that would pursue justice for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein is the Justice Department. The main point man at the Justice Department on this case is Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. He used to be Trump's personal lawyer, so you can see the extent to which the president has used the tool of the instruments of government for his own political ends. There's no evidence that Trump is criminally liable for anything to do with Epstein, but very many people have questions about how the Justice Department has handled this, and there are no chances right now of any criminal investigations into anything related to Epstein, the likes of which we're starting to see in the United Kingdom.
All right, Stephen, good to have you on the story. Thank you so much, Stephen Collinson, for us. Now, a second day of trilateral talks between Ukraine, Russia and the United States has ended in Abu Dhabi. A member of Ukraine's negotiating team calls the talks truly constructive. Ukraine's chief negotiator had described the first day of talks seen here as substantive and productive. The talks are happening as Russia targets Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The Kremlin saying its military operations will continue until Ukraine makes, quote, appropriate decisions. Today also marks the expiration of the New START nuclear weapons treaty between the United States and Russia. Both countries will have limits on nuclear arsenals for the first time in more than half a century. We've got Fred Pliken for us in Moscow. Fred, really good to see you. So what is the view of these talks from where you are?
Hi there, Eleni. Well, first of all, the Russians are also saying that there is movement, positive movement that's been happening in these talks. And while there are still many questions that need to be addressed, certainly both sides are saying one of the things that was achieved, and the U.S. is also saying, was a major prisoner exchange. And the U.S. side is saying it's the first major prisoner exchange in the past 5 months, where 314 prisoners from the respective sides were exchanged, 157 from each. We were getting some of the first images of that exchange coming from the Ukrainian side, and the Ukrainians are saying that 139 of those people who are now brought back to Ukraine were actually in Russian custody since 2022. They say the youngest of those who were brought back was 23 years old, that it was 150 Ukrainian soldiers who were brought back, and Ukrainian civilians. So the U.S. side is saying one of the first real tangible results of these negotiations that Steve Witkoff, the chief negotiator for the United States, the president's special envoy, is saying that these talks have been constructive and have also been making headway. One of the things that I think is quite interesting is, of course, we know that there are still some delicate questions that need to be addressed, specifically regarding territorial issues and what concessions the Ukrainians might be willing to make. The U.S. side and the Ukrainian side are saying that things are moving forward, and President Zelensky of Ukraine came out just a couple of minutes ago, and he said he wants this process to continue as fast as possible, and therefore he hopes that the next meeting, this next trilateral meeting, could happen in the not too distant future, in the near future, because the Ukrainians obviously want to see this get to some sort of result very quickly. The Russians, as you've noted, have said that as long as there is no agreement, their special military operation, as they call it, will continue. The Russians, of course, saying that right now they are the ones who have the momentum on their side on the battlefield.
Right, Fred Hyken for us in Moscow. Thank you for that update. Now, the US and Iran are expected to hold nuclear talks on Friday. Iran's foreign minister says he will meet with American envoy Steve Witkoff in Oman. However, Iranian leaders say the talks must be fair and equitable. But ahead of that meeting, President Trump had an anonymous message for Iran's supreme leader during his interview with NBC News. The US president said Ayatollah Ali Khamenei should be very worried as part of his exchange with NBC's Tom Lamas.
Should the supreme leader in Iran be worried right now?
I would say he should be very worried, yeah. He should be. As you know, they're negotiating with us.
I know they are, but the protesters have said, you know, where are the Americans? You promised them we would have their back. Do we still have their back?
Well, we've had their back, and look, that country's a mess right now because of us. We went in, we wiped out their nuclear.
So that's the question. If we wipe them
we
out,
have peace in the Middle East.
Well, President Trump also warning Iran that if it tries to revive its nuclear program at alternate sites after the U.S. strikes in June, quote, we're going to do bad things to you. The Trump administration has been weighing another major strike against the Iranian regime. A U.S. carrier strike group is already present in the waters of Iran. As the U.S. prepares for negotiations with Iran, Israel is moving up a security cabinet meeting, according to an Israeli official. It follows a visit by U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff to Israel on Tuesday, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted Tehran cannot be trusted. The security cabinet meeting, which was originally scheduled for Sunday, will now take place this afternoon. We've got Nick Robertson following developments for us from Jerusalem. Nick, good to see you. So what do we know about this cabinet meeting? What is expected to be on the agenda?
Well, I think we can expect Iran to be on the agenda, and the cabinet meeting, security cabinet meeting, is due to get underway right around about now, and it's an opportunity for the Prime Minister to brief those cabinet members on his meeting with Steve Witkoff earlier in the week, to give his assessment of whatever conversations were had about Iran, also about the peace deal in Gaza. But you know, this gives the Prime Minister here an opportunity to shape his narrative ahead of whatever comes out of those talks on Friday. And at the moment, the talks look like they're going ahead, but there's daylight, very clear daylight, between the two sides. The Iranian foreign minister late yesterday sort of rushing into Scotch rumours, it appeared that the talks were actually off by saying, no, we're going to meet the Americans for nuclear negotiations 10 a.m. or thereabouts in Oman. And Oman has now sort of taken over as a venue, not Turkey, along with other U.S. allies from the region at the table, just the U.S. It appears those mediators, the and the Iranians there. But the daylight is this, that the Iranian foreign minister says they're coming to the table for nuclear talks. But just yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Iran has to talk about their nuclear stockpiles of highly enriched uranium. Those have to be gotten rid of. Their ability to enrich uranium, that has to be ended. Not only that, this is what Iran is appearing that it will talk about, but they have to talk about their ballistic missiles, which threaten the United States Gulf allies, which threaten Israel. They have to talk about their proxies, and also have to talk about the way they treat the population. So there's a whole bunch of stuff the U.S. So, you know, the question from the Israeli perspective is that air gap that could be reduced in these talks or could get bigger. Is that going to precipitate some events over the weekend that the Prime Minister here in Israel wants to get ahead of? I don't think people genuinely believe that things are that febrile and fragile at the moment, but it certainly gives Prime Minister Netanyahu the chance to brief his cabinet and have a message about Israel, Iran, him shaping that message going into whatever comes out of those talks tomorrow.
All right, Nick Robertson, good to have you on the show. Thank you. And still to come, NBC anchor Savannah Guthrie and her siblings make an emotional plea on social media for the safe return of their mother. Plus, Donald Trump is talking about a softer touch on his immigration crackdown. The poll suggests it may be a little too late for that. We'll be right back.
Why, particularly in Gaza, why is leadership failed here?
Selfish, short-term interest.
This is Yutaka Mogami. He specializes in a traditional woodwork technique called Edo Sashimono. This type of furniture making is from 17th century Tokyo and requires no nails.
I think there's only about 10 Edo Sashimono craftspeople left in Tokyo. This work has been passed down in my family through 3 generations.
I come to the workshop making my own with wood for almost 50 years.
I like the sound of meditative woodwork.
I want to be people know about traditional techniques and skills packed.
How am I doing? Not bad.
Emotional, tearful plea from NBC News anchor Savannah Guthrie and her siblings days after their mother's harrowing abduction from a home near Tucson, Arizona. In this video, watch Savannah Guthrie pleads for her mother's proof of life in response to supportive ransom notes.
We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you. And we are ready to listen. Please, talk to us.
Have not yet identified a suspect. Search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie enters his 5th day. Says Maribel Gonzalez is running the story for us. Maribel obviously very emotional in here. Nancy's family there. But Savannah also hinting about the rise of AI in the video to reported kidnappers. How difficult is it for authorities to determine if the ransom note or any images of Nancy the family may have received are real, perhaps a hoax? What are you hearing from sources?
Eleni, well, that is a concern for so many people in law enforcement, but also for Savannah and for her family. She understands how many apps there are out there, how easy it is to manipulate those as well, and how good of a job some of these apps can do and make it look realistic. And so that is one of the reasons why you hear her say we need something to show a definitive proof that my mother is still alive. That is one of the things that she says in that video. And I will say that these random notes, you know, leaders have not yet confirmed whether those are legitimate, but earlier this week the Pima County Sheriff said they are not discarding any possibilities and that they are taking every bit of information. Now we spoke to an anchor that works at one of these media outlets that received these alleged notes. She said that note was sent via email, and this is what was striking to me about that interview with her. She said that it contained very sensitive information about Nancy, and also information, in her opinion, that only an abductor would be privy to. So that is definitely concerning, but the family is asking for evidence to show that Nancy is alive and well.
All right, so in terms of the investigation and what more we know on how that is transpiring, how they're able to, get some information and a few leads.
Yeah, so that is something that we were hoping to have updates at this point. Day 5, we are now in day 5 of this search. Right now, as you mentioned, there's no suspects. There's no information, at least made publicly, on the possible whereabouts of Nancy. Now, I should mention that on the very same day that this video was posted to social media by Savannah and her family, investigators were back here at Nancy's home, including FBI agents, and they appeared to be taking bags of what appeared to be evidence into their vehicles. That is significant because we hadn't seen that type of activity since the abduction happened here in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood. But again, we still don't have very much information. We know that it's been difficult for investigators to get surveillance camera from this area because, as you can see, it's pretty desert terrain. A lot of the houses are tucked behind vegetation, making it difficult to see, even if they have cameras on their front doors, difficult to see the street from there. So we are expecting to hear an update from Pima County Sheriff here shortly, in just a couple hours actually, and hopefully we'll get some new information on where this investigation.
All right, Meryl, thank you so much for that update. Meryl Gonzalez for us. Now, in a rare sign of into criticism, President Trump has conceded his administration could do with easing up its immigration crackdown. In an interview with ABC News, the president said the impact federal agents have had in cities across the United States and said the fatal shootings of Renee Good and Alex Pretty should not have happened.
Speaking of Minneapolis, what did you learn?
I learned that maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch, but you still have to be tough. These are criminals. We're dealing with really hard criminals.
The president's border czar, Tom Herman, already announced some changes happening in Minneapolis. 700 personnel are being withdrawn, and agents will now be equipped with body cams. But that leaves about 2,000 of them still in the city. Joining us now in the White House, we've got Elena Treen. Elena, good to see you. Do you expect Trump's concession and withdrawal of 700 personnel as a willingness for the administration to de-escalate, or is this simply because of the recent polling numbers?
I think it's a mix of both. And look, I will tell you that, of course, in the aftermath of both the fatal shooting of Renee, but then also of Alex, the administration, and particularly people at the top levels, people like the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, Stephen Miller, the president's Homeland Security advisors, and one of his deputy chiefs of staff, they were very aggressive in their defense rhetoric, really defending those ICE agents. But what I will say is that the tune has shifted now, because the president recognizes, as do many of his advisors, that the public is not there when it comes to what has been unfolding on the ground in Minnesota. And so part of this, I think, is, to your point, an acknowledgement that, yes, perhaps, having thousands of agents on the ground to carry out the president's immigration crackdown in Minnesota was maybe a little bit heavy-handed. And so we're starting to see that drawdown that we had heard his border czar, Tom Homan, kind of signal after arriving in Minnesota, of course, again, because of the protests and the backlash that this administration had seen following those shootings. But I also do think this is, of course, an acknowledgement of the polling. President Trump is someone who very much takes polling into consideration. He views polls all the time in that building behind me, and he recognizes, he knows how to read the room, I guess, in a sense, when it comes to things like this. And I think this was one of those where they realized that their messaging and their tactics were more aggressive than much of the country had actually wanted. And so we're seeing that kind of be changed. Now, I will say, we'll have to actually see if that's actually what happened. Sure, they're pulling out 700 agents. The president using a much more conciliatory tone than really he ever has in the past. He's not one to typically admit when he thinks approach, but we'll have to see if that actually leads to real substantial de-escalation on the ground. We, of course, have heard from local leaders, including Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, saying, 700, yeah, it's a good start, but it's not real. We'll really have to see how this plays out on the ground in the state, Eleni.
Yeah, very quickly on the body cams, and that could change things in terms of understanding interaction.
Is that there is going to be real footage now of all of this, and every single agent is going to know that how they act is going to be on camera. So that is supposed to be, I think, in many people's eyes, that have been used.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Now, the past year has seen massive cuts to foreign aid by developed nations led by the United States. After the break, I'll be speaking to the former head of the African Development Bank on how the continent is looking to fill financing gaps. Stick with CNN.
Tokyo takes pride in keeping its city clean. But why? Edo spirit is what keeps Tokyo clean.
Forest, one of Africa's most biodiverse ecosystems. Home to mountain gorillas, once nearly extinct. But thanks to local heroes and communities, their numbers have risen from 300 to nearly 460. A beacon of hope for conservation. Be part of the movement. Find out more on cnn.com/call to earth. In partnership with Rolex and its Perpetual Planet Initiative.
Let's talk business. This is Marketplace Middle East, where we update you on the latest financial news across the region. Hi, and you're watching Connect the World. Great to have you with us. These are your headlines. Ukraine and Russia are exchanging 314 prisoners of war. That announcement coming amid the latest round of trilateral peace talks in Abu Dhabi. This video shows ambulances carrying wounded Ukrainian soldiers home. The second round of talks involving the United States, Ukraine and Russia concluded a few hours ago. Ukraine's president says a third round will be held in the near future. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has apologized to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein for appointing Peter Mandelson as UK's ambassador to the United States. accused Van der lie about the strength of his ties to Epstein. Middleton was removed from his post here. Iran's foreign minister says talks with the US are scheduled for textile Development Bank. Today he launched the Global Africa Investment Summit. It aims to draw in capital and show the world the continent is an investment opportunity, not a development project. I want to welcome Akinwumi Adesina to the show. So great to have you with us.
Always.
You know, we've spoken so many times over the years, and you know, and I want to just quickly touch on what the United States has done, and actually other countries have followed suit, where you're seeing concessional funding for developmental agencies like the African Development Bank, which you were president of until mid last year. Who's going to fill in those gaps? Where are you going to see the money coming from when you've got big donors and big funders moving away?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, what we're saying is the world is so different in many, many ways. Geopolitical issues have become the agenda of the day. In fact, development doesn't really seem to be the focus today. Every time it's all about tensions, it's all about wars and all conflicts. And so that has actually had a lot of effects. And first and foremost is that if you look at Europe, for example, they've increased significantly the amount of resources that is going into defense. That means what? It means that something has to give, and development financing is what is affected. And in the case of the United States, you know, the United States is shifting, I think, under President Trump, its own approach. You know, every country has their own strategy. We can't force a country to have a particular strategy we want.
But don't you think it's a mistake? Look, I'm not saying about the aid side of things. I understand we're going to talk about that in a bit, but I'm talking about developmental funding. I'm talking about the project that President was Power Africa to get 30,000 megawatts of power on the continent. That was money-making projects.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that, you know, it's a different into investment-driven approaches,
which is a good thing. Okay, so I want to talk about your Global Investment Summit. You're very good at sort of putting minds together and putting pockets and wallets together and trying to extract for the good of development. You're here in Dubai. Have you signed deals? Have you seen interest?
Well, you know,
how much did you?
We launched a Global Africa Investment Summit.
Yeah.
Because if you take a look at it today, you were just talking about this. What does Africa have? Aid is gone. And so aid is not the way to develop. What Africa, concessional financing, we're talking about it, is also limited and also declining. So what Africa has in abundance are its own assets. It has minerals, oil, gas. It has rare earth. It has a lot of these assets. The total value of those assets, guess what? Is $6 trillion. So how do you have $6 trillion and not be able to finance your own development? So what we're doing through the Global Africa Investment Summit is to put together that allows Africa to interface global capital with its own sovereign assets to actually have this assets to deliver value. Africa's assets as they are, they're undervalued, and they are also on their level. On their level. Is to help African countries to navigate this complexity by having a platform that can allow it to de-risk all those areas in those particular sectors, but also give confidence to investors that want to come to Africa. Take a look, you and I have talked over the years to even find out the transaction costs are very, very high. The due diligence takes a very, very long time, and there is no trusted global platform for global capital to interface with Africa's sovereign assets. And so this is the way in which we are going to restructure all of Africa's sovereign assets.
How long will it take you to do? I mean, we're talking about now. We know we need enough bankable projects on the continent. We need to see, a rejigging of the way that, I think risk is absolutely mispriced in Africa, right? So it's just a lot more expensive for everyone.
Yeah.
Why only now?
Well, why now? For various reasons. One, we started by saying that aid is gone. Secondly, what you were talking about in terms of the critical minerals, globally, right? You're having a repricing of supply chains in terms of repricing Africa's critical minerals, energy, which are also going to be very critical for AI, for defense systems, but also for energy transition that we are talking about. And if you also look at what the world is looking at in terms of ESG investors, they are looking for parts of the world in which they can actually have great assets that will give them high yields. And the kind of assets that Africa has falls right in the middle of that particular intersection. And so what the Global Africa Investment Summit will do is to allow the global capital to be able to interface with all those assets through a structured way. And that's very new. I was excited to have 4 presidents here. We had the president of Tanzania, the president of Ghana, and the prime minister of Mozambique here. And they are saying they are ready to engage in a different way by actually creating value out of what they have, not depending on some
Inside the weekdays on CNN.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump play any role in your decision to resign? Why do you need to study it? It sounds like you have the facts on your fingertips.
Great question. There really is much more that unites us than that which divides us.
Watch The Lead, weeknights on CNN.
CNN World Sport.
Non-stop action year-round.
I have a lot of things to give to the football.
All the major events. I love where the game is going right now.
What does it take for me to be even better?
And tournaments.
The emotions sometimes are impossible to control.
The latest highlights.
Women's sport is having a moment that it should have always had.
And exclusive interviews with your favorite coaches and players.
We're going to keep this thing rolling.
We rock.
Don't miss
CNN
World Sport, only on CNN.
The 2026 Live Golf season is now underway in Riyadh. Captains Bryson DeChambeau and John Ram were among the stars hitting the links. 4-year-old Liv has been at loggerheads with the long-running PGA, which has punished players who joined the Saudi-backed league by banning them from tournaments. But this year, for the first time, some Liv players will be able to earn official world golf ranking. Points to qualify for major. Championships. Now, the Olympics opening ceremony isn't starting until Friday.
To be fit and ready to go, but certainly wish her well. One thing we've always learned with Lindsay over the years, Eleni, is to expect the unexpected. She is one courageous competitor. Back to you.
She is indeed. I mean, incredible videos there. Patrick, good to have you on. We will see you right after the short break with more sports, and I'll be back at the top of the hour. Stay with CNN.
To me,